Hey, welcome back to the show. It's Ding. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is going to be the first of a 5-part, maybe 7-part show. That was for my daughter, guys. Sorry, middle schoolers. What can I say? It's going to be the first show of a couple at least. We're going to do a season ending series here. We'll start off with running backs. And we'll also talk about the season in general. Yeah, week 18 is this weekend, but who cares? All right, unless you're in a postseason or whatever, which if you are, good luck. But I'm not. So let's talk about it. All right, let's talk season overall. I had 3 teams this year. I had a co-manager in one team. We didn't do so well. We finished 5th. That's okay. At least we weren't 12th and we have to get like tattoos or something. And then in the other 2 leagues, I finished 1st and 2nd. So big money year. I drafted exactly how I told you guys to draft. So hopefully you had the same success that I did. We're going to focus on running backs this week and why running backs are the king. And yes, King Henry is part of that, and he probably gave you 50 points if you had the guts to start him in week 17. And if you did, good on you. All right, let's jump into it. Let's talk about running backs, how I ranked them, and then how they actually did. I'm not going to go through the entire list, 1 through 40, because if you listen to my show, you would get that. You could also go back through my X account, and you'll see the rankings there. Obviously, number 1 overall for the season was CMC. Wicked comeback player of the year. I thought both of his ankles and both of his feet were busted. Apparently, he went overseas and got some magical drug, came back, scored 405 points. Good on him. I didn't see it coming. Didn't even have him in my top 20. So great on him. I thought he was done for his career. Way to resurrect yourself. Kind of like an Adrian Peterson-esque or even Jordy Nelson after he had his knee completely wiped out. So good on CMC. Proud of the guy. Glad he made a comeback. And second was Bijan Robinson. Great running back. I had him as number 1 in mine. I'm sure he did, or he was on your board. He was number 1 more than likely. The reason that he didn't beat CMC was because of poor coaching. If you didn't watch him all season long, his coach had absolutely no idea how to use him. Bringing in Algier to vulture most of his touchdowns, it was awful. The reason why Atlanta had a bad year, they didn't give the ball to Bijan. So I look for him to take over number 1. I don't think CMC's 405 points is repeatable. I think Bijan's the number 1 overall next year. Number 3 this year was JT. He's awesome. He actually made it in a whole year. So congratulations. That's the first time in a long time. But this is not repeatable. If you think JT is going to be top 5 next year, I think you're kidding yourself. With bad quarterback play, Jones out. Yeah, they looked great. What was it? 8 wins in a row for Indy? Not going to happen next year. And he's going to have an off year. So great job for JT. I didn't see him in the top 10, but I don't think it's repeatable. And number 4, we have Gibbs. And you know I'm a Detroit Lions fan. Gibbs was awesome. But those last 2-3 weeks, his coaches, what were they thinking? They weren't giving Gibbs the ball at all. He had like maybe 10 touches a game. It was pathetic. And that's why Gibbs finished with 348 points. 20 more points, which he should have had over those last 3 weeks, would have had him beating Bijan. And he would have been number 2. So again, Bijan, Gibbs next year should be your 1, 2. CMC mixed in there, hopefully, if his health stays. And then rounding out the top 5, A-Chain. Now, the reason why A-Chain is up in the top 5, and I had him in the top 10, which is great, the reason why he's number 5 this year is because of the injuries at Miami. I mean, let's face it, bad quarterback play, big injury to Hill. This is why he's number 5. This is not repeatable. Again, a top 10 running back, but top 5, no, that's not repeatable. At number 6, we had Cook. And then 7 was King Henry. Now, when we look at the board for running backs, this is the key one, 6-7. 6-7. Sorry, I got to stop that. She's been crushing me all week with that. Henry, his totals was 269 points. Cook at 6 was 304 points. So that's the difference between 6 and 7. It was almost a 40-point jump. And Henry, obviously, 140 points behind number 1. So the big picture here is, this year, if you didn't get one of the top 6 backs, gigantic drop off to number 7 and even beyond. So that was the first big thing you should have pulled away from running backs this year and every year. If you don't get a piece of the top 6, you need to shift over to wide receivers. And we'll talk about that in the wide receiver episode. At 8, we've got Chase Brown. 9, Kyron Williams, always my favorite. And then 10, ETN, rounding it out. Now, ETN, this is a one-off. He was healthy this year. That's huge. Great quarterback play and great head coach, something the Jaguars severely lacked, and they're going to the playoffs because of it. So what do I think ETN can do next year? Same thing. Probably, honestly, if he can stay healthy, and that's always the key, right? He's had problems before, but if he can stay healthy, he can stay in the top 10, easily top 15. And that's somebody you should target next year as well in the later rounds. At 11, there was Javonte Williams. Not terribly surprised. We talked about it in our draft episode, but who else is going to take the ball? Javonte Blue didn't take it. There's really nobody else on that team for the Dallas Cowboys. So, I mean, if he doesn't get any competition, if they don't go and draft somebody, I don't see Blue taking his spot. And Williams looks good. At 12, Jacobs. Now, he had one game when he was injured. He could have taken over the 11th spot. He could have even gotten in front of ETN. I think Jacobs is always a top 10 back. And I think at that injury, that really cost him. Janty. Now, I didn't like drafting Janty in the first round. I think anybody who went and got him at the 8th spot, which is where he was going, was crazy. He didn't return those kinds of numbers at all for a first round pick. Maybe next year he'll be better. They're going to need better wide receiver play. They're going to need a better quarterback. Duh. But I think Geno's going to be there. I'm not sure they're going to draft. I know they've got the number 1 pick. Or is it number 2? I forget. In the game of the losers, who was it won? I think the Raiders have the number 1 pick. So if they do, I don't think they're going to go grab Mr. Indiana, who's going to be a good quarterback in the NFL, but I just don't think they go get him. After Janty at 14 is Barkley. Really bad year. And I actually said this. I didn't have Barkley outside the top 10 like he is in this one, but you could almost see the writing on the wall. I mean, after all, Barkley gets 2,000 yards, and what is Hurts looking at? Hurts is hurt because he's not the man. So what does the coach have to do? He's got to make Hurts feel better about himself. So he gives the ball less to Barkley and tries to throw more. So what happened? Hurts had a pretty big year throwing. A.J. Brown had a big year receiving. And where were the Eagles? Barely squeaking in the playoffs, if in fact they do. Does that really help Philly by not giving Barkley the ball? I don't know, but Hurts feels better about himself. So I guess that's a good thing. At 15, we have Swift, and now even missing a game, he did pretty good. But when you get into the teens, these guys are only differential by about 10 to 15 points throughout that whole, 11 through 16 range. So if you're grabbing one of these guys, it's really about who you like, who their schedule is, who you think is not going to be hurt, who has the least amount of competition to vulture their touchdowns. Swift, Monankai's looking good. So I think Swift, 15 this year, that was a big number for him. I'm not sure that's repeatable because, again, he's got some competition for next year. And I mean, with his head coach, that head coach is always looking for 2 running backs that complement each other and passing those touchdowns off evenly. So look out, Swift. At 16, we have Dowdle. Now, Dowdle jumps into 16. The only reason he finishes in the top 20 is because of Hubbard's injury. And that's a big deal. But he scores over 200 points, pretty solid. At 17, Breece Hall. Jets are a train wreck. If you're looking to go get Breece Hall next year, you really have to just look at it as a top 20 pick and really save it for a late round. Or if you're spending a 3rd rounder on Breece Hall, then you're either desperate or you started with a 0 running back strategy. At 18, we have Harvey, rookie running back. He's only going to get better. Obviously thrust into that position because J.K. Dobbins' injury, so that's a big deal. That really helped him. I don't think he would be in the top 20 if it wasn't for that. So the injury was obviously a good thing for him. If J.K. comes back healthy next year, I would expect J.K. to get hurt again like he always does. Keep it in that lens. Harvey only did as well as he did because of Dobbins' injury. Still a talented kid. I think he'll do well next year. Then 19, Jaylen Warren. That's a really interesting one. I don't think it's repeatable, but at 20, we have Gainwell, which is interesting because the 2 running backs are on the same team. They complement each other. And Gainwell was really coming on strong at the end of the season, but he kept Warren fresh. So I don't think either one of these guys beats this number, but you could see them both together again easily in the top 25 next year. At 21 is a nice surprise, Travion Henderson. Now, traditionally, the Patriots have no idea what to do when they run the ball. But Stevenson got hurt, and then there were other issues. And guess what? Travion, he's like, okay, fine, I'll take it. And he did extremely well. I think the Patriots have finally figured out that they have an RB1. Hallelujah. Congratulations. It only took like 12 years or so. But I think he takes the number 1 role next year. It's his to lose. And we see Travion Henderson in the top 15 next year. So I would draft him pretty strong next year. I'll be looking for that. At 22 is Pollard. Not necessarily a surprise. I had him pretty close to this. I mean, he is a starting running back, but you could see as the season wore on, his wheels started to wear off. So I think Pollard, this could be his last season. At 23, we have Walker. Now, Kenneth Walker, if you had Kenneth Walker, you had to be upset. Charbot was always grabbing his touchdowns, and Charbot finished at 26, not very far behind him. So, I mean, when you're getting vultured like that, they're both talented running backs, but again, neither of them are going to crack the top 20 unless one of them gets hurt. And, this year, both of them were fairly healthy. At 24, we had Judkins. Now, this was a huge surprise. It took 3 different injuries and, 4 different arrests and, a couple of parole cases to get Judkins finally on the field. And when he did, he really produced. But I think it's because of bad quarterback play. I mean, let's face it. The quarterback situation for Cleveland is atrocious. If it continues to be that way next year, I think, Judkins can easily be a top 20 as long as he plays an entire season. And then at 25, I had Montgomery. Monty took kind of a back roll to Gibbs this year. The Lions struggled. Monty's a great running back, but I can see, next year, this is about where he's going to be unless he picks up a couple of extra touchdowns. At 27, we have Stevenson. Obviously, he was out for 3 games for injury. I think he's on the downward slope of his career there. Not that I don't like him, but unfortunately, I think, Travion Henderson looks great. At 28, we have Marks. We don't know what's going to happen next year with Mixon, etc. at Houston, but what we see right now is that Marks can be the RB1 there. At 29 is Monange. Again, see what I said about Swift. He's an up-and-comer, so look out, Swift. I think Swift drops and Monange ends up climbing. At 30 is Hunt. Why is Hunt there? Because Pacheco's terrible, one, and they just don't give him the ball very much. I think Hunt missed a couple of touchdowns this year, but again, when you get into this later tier, the 28 through 40s, all these guys are about 10 points within 10 or 15 points of each other. At 31 is JCM, just call me Bill. I like the kid, but the Redskins had absolutely no idea how to use him. He has fumble problems, so he's got to work on that in the offseason. But I think if they really commit to him, he'll be better and he'll get more points. I can see him in the top 25 next year. After that, not a whole lot of big names. Omarion Hampton at 33, that's significant because everybody was really high on him. But in reality, it took an injury for him to get there. So if he has competition again next year, this could be an issue. But I think we all see that Hampton is the guy there, and hopefully the coaching staff sees it too. Again, run, heavy offense, good quarterback in Hebert. Hopefully he gets healthy again and Hampton can score. Other notable names, Scatabo made it into the top 40 at 36. What's his problem? Major injury. I really can't see him getting in the top 40 again with the way he plays. I'm not sure I'm going to take a risk on him next year. I don't think you should either, but we'll see, right? We had Irving at 35. He had a really bad year, 7 games injured. If he's kind of like CMC where he's injured big time and then he comes back, next year could be a bounce back year for Irving and find himself in the top 10 again. The opportunity is there. The talent is there, and he's shown that he can do it. So I like Irving for a bounce back year next year. So somebody to take a look at. Mason, he was out there. Algier, Mr. Vulture. Aaron Jones, I think he's on the downward spiral with Mason there. And then even, J.K. Dobbins is at 41. We had a couple of guys surprise this year. We had a couple of duds, big time, obviously. Yeah, it was a good year. I think if you stuck to the drafting strategy that we talked about and either went 0 running back or you went running back heavy early and you got 2 of those top 6s, man, you probably rolled. And that's what I found. My success in my 2 leagues was I had the right mix of running backs with one really great receiver. And then I was able to control it after that with solid tight ends. And we'll talk more about that in those shows. All right, that'll do it for tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening. And as always, I give a shout out to the men and women in uniform who protect the freedoms that we hold dear. Thank you for your service and sacrifice. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, follow us on X, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on our latest content. And until then, remember, established dominance isn't just a catchphrase. It's a commitment. Are you ready?